It is indeed a great privilege to be able to speak to this very honorable forum today, and I'm grateful for the conveners of this important conference. It is particularly appropriate to speak on this topic after Tzvi Chezkeli's shaking clips and the whole talk. And I feel that it is indeed a very significant perspective that I can bring here to this topic of religion, human rights, the interplay, interaction, what's going on in the Middle East, where Israel fits within all this. And I shall start with talking about the Israeli case, which is what I am most my expertise focuses on what's going on here at home, but then I will tie it together to the overall scenario based on my experience sitting on the CEDAW committee for almost for 6 years now, a little more than 6 years. And I prepared something, but then I changed it because I decided that I first want to start on a very personal basis to tell you how my day yesterday went on the professional front, because it really gives a very inclusive picture of our struggle here. By our, I mean women's struggle here in Israel. As you heard, I'm the founding director of the Rackman Center for the Advancement of the Status of Women here in Israel. So, yesterday morning, we were at the Parliament sitting in the Committee on Legislation, which prepared the bill to ensure that there are at least 4 women on the committee that selects the rabbinical judges for the rabbinical courts. That bill, which was initiated by 3 women legislators, was actually prepared and initiated by us at the Rackman Center here at Bar-Ilan University. And yesterday, the day that started early in that legislation committee and ended at 4 a.m. this morning, and that's why I'm a bit tired today, was successfully passed and culminated a work of almost 2 years on this specific piece of legislation. But I just ask you to bear in mind, the great achievement is that there are going to be at least 4 women on an 11 members committee that selects the rabbinical judges that are sitting on the rabbinical courts and have exclusive jurisdiction to decide on issues of marriage and divorce and other affiliated matters in these cases between Jews. Are there any women judges in these courts? Of course not. So the great achievement is that women will take part in selecting and appointing those judges. From the Parliament, we went straight on to the High Court of Justice, where we had an appeal that asks, I will not go into the very details of the matter, but that asks that that Minister Bennett, who is in charge of religious affairs in Israel, will not appoint the 10 public representators for the body, for the convention that appoints the chief rabbis, so that the other bill that is planned to enhance, to enlarge the scope of this convention will be able to pass all the legislative process. That bill is designed so that there will be at least 20% of women participating in the convention that selects and appoints the chief rabbis. How many people are currently on that convention, on that committee? 150. How many of them are women? 1. What is the origin of this convention? It originates almost 100 years ago, in 1920, when there was a huge battle here in pre-state Palestine or pre-state Israel, between the old Jewish establishment and the newcomers, the Zionist newcomers, and the old ultra-Orthodox Jewish establishment here objected to any of the novel ideas, including those of gender equality, and objected even the mere right of women to vote. And this body is the legacy of that battle from almost 100 years ago, and we are still fighting this. And once again, is there any possibility that women, under the current construction of religion and state in Israel, that women will serve as rabbis, not to talk about chief rabbis? Of course, there is no such possibility currently. So the battle now is to have women on that committee. And as I speak just now, we have our lawyers from the Rackman Center arguing a case in front of the Grand Rabbinical Court in Jerusalem. That case involves a woman who is, in our terms in Hebrew, aguna, meaning a chained woman, meaning a woman who cannot receive her bill of divorce from her spouse because her spouse refuses to do that. She is chained for 13 years now. And in her case, the circumstances were so extreme that the rabbinical court did use its powers, which it only seldom uses, sadly, but it did use its powers to have the man, after the man fled and ran away, he was found, and he was arrested by the rabbinical court so as to force him to grant her the bill of divorce, the get. He still refused to do so. And 4 months ago, in a hearing at the Grand Rabbinical Court, he jumped out of the second-floor window, ran away, never to be found again. And we are now arguing on religious grounds, on halachic, religious legal grounds. We are arguing at the Grand Rabbinical Courts that there are ways within religious law to free this woman, even if the husband is not found, even if he does not grant her the bill of divorce. And I emphasize this very last point. There are grounds within the Jewish law, within the halacha, within the religious tradition. And this is really my main point in trying to tie all the perspectives together. In my 6 years sitting on the CEDAW committee, this experience enables, which involves 3 times a year, 3-week session, now only in Geneva, hearing every time at least reports from 8 to 10 countries each session, and those countries reporting to us on whatever transpired within the last 3, 4, or 5 years in their country in terms of implementing their international obligations to advance women and to eliminate gender discrimination in those countries. This gives me, or this gave me, a very comprehensive perspective of women's status, women's position all over the world, including developed countries, including developing countries, the global north, the global south, everything. More than 100 countries we've already heard during this 6 years that I served on the committee. Perhaps the strongest experience that I experience is the similarity between our work here as women fighting religious extremism, fighting religious fundamentalism, fighting patriarchy, which is really, very sadly, very often based on religious perspectives and religious norms and religious law. The similarity between what we experience here and what women in Arab world, in Muslim countries, in African countries experience. They experience the same confrontation, the same battle, And the strategies are very often also very similar. And I want to emphasize here and say it with deep regret, because I myself come from religious background, and I consider myself to be a committed and an observant Jew according to my own understanding of religion. And I do not want to fight religion. I want to fight those who currently have the power to tell us what religion says. Those who currently have the power to decide for everybody else what religious law is and what religion demands. And like we saw in Tzvi Yechezkeli's short clip, the words about Sharia will rule. Who decides what Sharia is? Who decides what Sharia says? Sharia is an extremely vague notion, and currently those who have the power, who are all men who have the power to decide what's in Sharia, they abuse this power and they abuse this control over the interpretation and over the implementation. And going back to the situation in Israel, again, I say sadly that in this area of religious control over marriage and divorce, and also over some related matters to marriage and divorce, we cannot say honestly that Israel is a democracy. In this respect, Israel is not a democratic country because of the inherent, because of the blatant, because of the institutional gender discrimination that is built into the current construction of religious control over marriage and divorce, and the impossibility of civil marriages and civil divorces in Israel. And in this respect, we are much more similar to the neighboring countries in this part of the world than to the countries in the developed world which we consider ourselves to be part of. And this again brings me back to the shared experiences of women in this region and in other parts of the world who experience the same phenomena which in legal terms we call the personal status regime or legal pluralism, namely the existence of a number of legal systems in the same country over the same people, and the exclusive control and very often the state-enforced control of religious law in the very sensitive and personal areas of family law. Personal status means family law and all related matters to family law. And there are dozens of countries that are still under this regime. Israel is being part of them. And again, as I said before, the strongest experience is the similarities between the tactics and the strategies that we women are trying to employ and trying to make use in our fight to change this system of legal pluralism and to enable the choice and to achieve a situation where people all over the world will have the choice between civil law and religious law, and within religious law to be able to have the religious laws develop and change in the direction of respecting human rights. And respecting, by saying respecting human rights, I mean respecting human rights according to the United Nations Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and according to the United Nations System of Human Rights Convention, CEDAW being only one of them, the ICCPR, the economic and social rights, the children's rights. You all know all the 10, maybe upcoming 11 human rights conventions. This is the system to which so many countries have theoretically adopted Unfortunately, very few of them really adhere to all the inclusive set of human rights. But this is what we should aspire to. And the human rights treaty bodies, the committees that oversee the implementation of these conventions, are the key to achieve a universal implementation of the Human Rights Convention. It is an uphill struggle. It is an uphill battle. And women are key players in this battle because, as we saw, and as I tell you, the experience shows, is that women are the victims of the abuse of human rights and the abuse of Sharia and the abuse of religious law. For women, it is definitely not an Arab Spring. And by the way, the term that I understood is the politically correct term in the UN to use is countries in transition. And when saying countries in transition, we really do not know what the direction of the transition is going to be. So women currently are not enjoying any of these developments. And as I say, women are the key players to have the change and have the transition go in the right direction. And personally, again, going to my own personal experience, I truly wish that we will have the possibility to cooperate with such organizations, maybe some of you know as the Musawa, who are the Muslim feminists who show that there are so many venues within Sharia, within Muslim law, to develop in the direction of gender equality. And when I read texts and when I speak to my friends in Musawa, unfortunately I cannot meet them here in Israel, obviously I cannot meet them in their own countries, but we can meet in Geneva. And when I meet them in Geneva and I talk to them and I hear what they write, I could just change the words between Jewish law or halacha and Sharia, and the text would be so similar. It is just striking. And I really believe that the potential is there, and I truly hope that we will be able to develop this potential and work together to advance the status of women and to really bring the whole world into a much, much better place. Thank you.